Hello, my cyber friends, and welcome to Doubtless Faith. I'm Kristen Davis, and today we're going to answer a question posed by one of our readers. Joshua writes, I was wondering what you thought about Bible skeptics saying that the Hebrews copied the Noah story from the Epic of Gilgamesh. What are your thoughts about the skeptics saying that the Epic of Gilgamesh is older than the biblical account? Well, this is an interesting question because I've always had a fondness for the Gilgamesh Epic. My first encounter with it was in my history and Bible classes in 7th grade. To begin, I'm going to share a little bit about the Gilgamesh Epic, and then we'll discuss how it relates to the Bible, followed by what it means for Christianity. To begin, the tablets containing the Gilgamesh Epic were written between 1600 and 2000 BC. Although various copies of the poem about Gilgamesh have been found, the most notable and most often cited edition is the 12-tablet Babylonian translation. Within these poems, Gilgamesh is portrayed as a superhero. He's two-thirds divine and causes all sorts of trouble for the gods. The most relevant portion of the Gilgamesh Epic for Christianity is a portion known as the Atrahasis Epic. This portion of the epic has interesting similarities to the Genesis flood account. Rather than Noah, the main character of the Babylonian story is a man named Utnapishtim. After surviving the flood, the epic states that he was granted eternal life. Some interesting similarities between the two accounts are that men multiply and cause trouble. God then sends a flood to destroy mankind, and one man in the Babylonian account, known as Utnapishtim, is warned of the flood. He builds a boat, fills it with food and animals, and he is saved while the world perishes. At this point, a good portion of the Atrahasis Epic is destroyed, so we don't have any details about the landing. It picks back up with Utnapishtim making offerings to the gods, and the gods accepting those offerings, just as we see in Genesis 8. Scholars have gone back and forth on whether or not they see reasons to believe the Genesis flood text and the Babylonian flood text as dependent upon one another, yet the interesting thing about the Gilgamesh Epic containing a flood story is that there's extra biblical evidence of a global flood. Here we have a document that is not part of the Bible that confirms the biblical account. It is more likely that the accounts are similar because they are traditions passed down through different families about the same event than that the Israelites merely copied the Babylonian text. Considering the different understanding of the purpose of the flood and the different view of the divine portrayed in each flood. We also have a second non-biblical account which confirms the flood account. This one is even more interesting because it is a historical ledger of the kings of Samaria, not a poem to promote the heroism of a particular king like the Gilgamesh Epic does. The Sumerian king list goes through a list of numerous Sumerian kings, listing the length of their rule and their successors, but the interesting portion is found on line 39 and 40, where the list breaks and says, "Then the flood swept over the earth, and after the flood swept over the earth." At which point the document then picks back up with the names of the kings and the lengths of their rule. This is interesting because we have a non-biblical historical document that bears witness to the Genesis flood. So to answer the question about whether the Israelites copied the Gilgamesh Epic, I would say they were probably aware of it, but that the reason we see a similar story in Babylonian writings and in Hebrew writings is because both people groups had ancestors that experienced the flood and passed that tradition down to later generations. But don't take my word for it. Go get yourself a copy of the Gilgamesh Epic at any local bookstore, read it alongside Genesis 6 through 9, and see what the Lord speaks to your heart.